Hi everyone, welcome to today's Silverlight Show webinar. We have today as our guest speaker again Gill, one of our
Hello,
most
everyone.
appreciated speakers. Gill will talk on the topic of Expression Blend 4 for developers. This webinar will take approximately 60-65 minutes, including a short Q&A session at the end. So the Q&A session will take about 5-10 minutes, so feel free to send your questions using the chat option inside your control panels, and you will try to respond to as many as possible questions at the end. So if we don't have anything responded, if there's no time, we will email a personal reply to all questions. So feel free to complete our post-webinar survey. We'll ask for your feedback on the webinar and some additional questions, so you can win 3 ebooks from Gill Clearing's light version of his cookbook. Okay, so Gill, can we begin?
Okay, thank you, Svetla. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webinar. I counted this time. It is my 7th webinar that I'm doing for Silverlight
Wow,
Show,
okay.
so yeah, it's going quite well. Actually. And so today talking about Expression Blend for developers. So it's the goal of this webinar to give you as a XAML developer, a Silverlight developer, can be Windows Phone developer, can be a WPF developer as well. So in general, all XAML developers will benefit from this webinar. And the goal of this webinar is really showing you how you can be more productive as a developer using Expression Blend. So in my daily life, I see that many developers always turn to Visual Studio for all tasks, and they just don't open Expression Blend. Perhaps they don't even know Expression Blend, and I'm convinced that many tasks that in fact require manual coding in Visual Studio can be done in Expression Blend for being more productive as a XAML developer. So let me go ahead and let me first quickly introduce myself. So my name is Gill. I am a Microsoft Regional Director and a Silverlight MVP. I work as an architect at the .NET Architect at a company called Ordina here in Belgium, where I mostly do Silverlight and ASP.NET projects. I'm a regular speaker. I'm doing a lot of sessions all over Europe. I was at NDC last week. I've been at Tech Days all over the place. So maybe we'll meet up, and if we do, come and say hi. I have also a user group here in Belgium, which is called Visuch, and I've written a book on Silverlight, which is called Silverlight for Data and Services Cookbook, and I'm currently writing on my 2nd book. I've also placed up there my slides, on one slide my email address and my blog, and you can download the slides as well as the demos from my blog and from the Silverlight Show website as well. I've also included my Twitter, so if you want to follow me on Twitter, go ahead. That's simply my first name, last name, so Gill. Some good news, like Svetla already mentioned, is that you can win a copy of the light edition of my book, the one that is already out there. So the first book, my Silverlight for Data and Services Cookbook, that I wrote together with Kevin Docks. There is now a light edition that contains, well, a few chapters of that full book. So it's more like a small introduction to the Data and Services Cookbook, and it can help you on your way into the world of Silverlight's enterprise applications. You can win it. It's entirely sponsored by Pact Publishing, so the publisher of my book. Simply fill in the evaluation after the webinar, and you could be one of the lucky winners. Okay. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at what we will be talking about during this talk. So I'm sure that in the huge list of participants today, there will be a few people that have never seen Expression Blend. So I'm going to start with a very short, a 5-minute maximum overview of Expression Blend, just to make sure that everyone is on board and nobody feels completely lost when I open Expression Blend. I'm just going to show you what it is. I'm going to explain you what it is and show you a few basics. And then we're going to dive in. First, I'm going to explain a bit about Sketchflow and how I think that is a tool that is really necessary to know by any XAML developer. Then I will be talking about customizations, things that I think taking or typing them manually in Visual Studio is way too costly, is way too unproductive. So things like styling, building resource dictionaries, building custom control templates, using the parts and states model, it can all be done by hand, but it takes so much time that I'm sure that you can be more productive if you use Expression Blend for these tasks. Then we're going to take a look a bit at some data-related stuff. I'm going to explain you a bit about sample data generation as well as how we can use data binding from Expression Blend. Then we'll take a look at behaviors, and I'm also going to show you a bit about the, Windows Phone 7, so WP7, how you can do, how you can use Expression Blend there as well. And if we have time, we'll take a look when we get there. I'm going to show you a few quick tricks inside of the blend bag of tricks, and that's what we'll finish off with. So that's what I have planned for this talk. As always, the talk is entirely recorded, so you can view it afterwards. And if you have questions for me, simply send them through the Q&A window. I will do them at the end of the talk. That's after I've done talking. So that's what I have planned. I hope it is to your liking. Let's dive straight in. So I'm going to start by giving you a 5-minute overview of Expression Blend. For the people who already know about Expression Blend, you can take a 5-minute break or do something else for 5 minutes and then come back. So, but it's not going to be more than, it's not going to be very long, so perhaps you can stay around. That's perhaps better. So what exactly is Expression Blend? Well, it is a tool that was released back when WPF, so the Windows Presentation Foundation, was released as a tool mostly aimed at designers to help them build next generation applications together with developers. Now, the tool evolved quite a lot, and it also now supports, of course, Silverlight and Windows Phone application development. It is a tool that was initially aimed at designers, but I am convinced that every developer should have Expression Blend in his toolbox as well, because many tasks can be done from Visual Studio, but you can do them much easier from Expression Blend. Although the focus is thus designers, developers should know about the tool as well. There are many things that you can do in Expression Blend that you can't do in Visual Studio. Just out of the top of my head, this is a small list what you can do related to XAML, or what Visual Studio offers you related to XAML development. So you can, of course, create new projects. You can you have templates for phone applications, for Silverlight applications. You have, of course, in Visual Studio source control support, and by the way, that is supported in Expression Blend since version 3 as well. So that helps you getting a better workflow, because you can switch from both the tools, and from both tools you can work with, for example, Team Foundation. So there is a good workflow between the two tools because they work with the same files. Also, Visual Studio has, of course, a design window. It has a designer, and of course it has a rich code editor, which I think is the best in Visual Studio. However, the design window, the design interface inside of Visual Studio is not that great, I think. I think while it is okay, it works. The experience that Expression Blend offers in terms of drag and drop development, or in terms of what you see is what you get development, Visual Studio is less good than Expression Blend. Visual Studio also offers a data source window, a data binding window that was added to Visual Studio with the 2010 version. So it has, as I mentioned, a working design surface. So it works, but it doesn't always work. I think on my machine it crashes quite a few times while doing XAML development, so there is some room for improvement. Visual Studio, of course, also has a toolbox, and that toolbox should not be mixed with the toolbox offered by Expression Blend. So the toolbox in Visual Studio really offers you to do control drag and drop. So, but out of the box in Visual Studio, there is no way, for example, to draw a rectangle. That doesn't exist. So this is what Visual Studio can do roughly for you, but Visual Studio can't do these things for you. For example, as I mentioned, the UI editor in Expression Blend is a lot richer. For example, it also has a UI hierarchy window. As you all know, XAML is a huge hierarchy, and it nests many objects. Giving you an overview of this nested object is done by the UI hierarchy window, so the object and timeline window that we'll take a look at in just a second. It's also possible to do animations quite easily from Expression Blend. In typing animations out by hand is really not an easy task. It's very error prone and very time consuming. So Expression Blend offers you an animation creator using storyboards and timelines. It also supports visual states. We'll take a look at visual states later on when we look at the Visual State Manager. That is also something that is very code intensive if you have to do it by hand. Resource management, so resource dictionaries, we'll take a look at those as well, how Expression Blend helps us managing our resources inside of dictionaries. We have support for design time data, allowing us to create data that is available during the design of the application. We'll take a look at that later on as well. And Sketchflow, which we'll take a look at in the next topic, which is a prototype design. So with that out of the way, let me jump quickly to Expression Blend. I have it open here. This is version 4. The first thing that you see when you open Expression Blend is, of course, the fact that it has a dark interface, which might ring a bell. If you see many designer applications, it's also a dark interface. So that is why a lot of people, I think, are afraid of Expression Blend. They see this dark interface, but and they think it is a designer application. It's not meant for me as a developer. Now, the good news is that you can go to the options, and in here in these options you have the ability to set everything to light, and then the interface is perhaps a more developer oriented interface. But I'm going to leave it dark because I'm used to the tool in the dark interface. So I'm going to create a new project, so file new project, and then I get the project window, the project template window in fact, which offers me a choice between Silverlight development, Windows Phone development, and WPF development. So I'm going to take a Silverlight application for now. So as you can see here at the bottom, I have Silverlight application's name, where I'm going to place it. It supports C# or VB. We're of course going to select C#, and it also supports version 3 and version 4. Why is it so slow here? There we go. So it supports Silverlight 3 and Silverlight 4 development. So there we are now in the application. I can't zoom in because I can try once again, but it often fails. Yeah, it fails again, so I shouldn't be doing this. So sorry for that. I'm going to close this one down. So I hope you can see my mouse cursor to see what exactly I am doing. So here at the left of the Expression Blend interface, you have the project window, which gives me an overview of my solution with my two projects in. There's a site and a Silverlight application. I can right-click on this and say Edit in Visual Studio, and it will open me Visual Studio. So exactly the opposite way as you can jump from Visual Studio to Expression Blend, you can also do the opposite and open in Expression Blend and jump there from Visual to Visual Studio. So both the tools, Visual Studio and Expression Blend, work with the same project files, the same solution files, enabling us a good developer designer workflow. I'm going to close this one down. We're not going to use that now. Okay, so on the very left here I have my toolbox, and as mentioned, this is a different toolbox. It allows me to do things like drawing a rectangle onto the surface, and then I get the ability to change the colors. And here, as you see on the right, I have a huge list of properties that I can search. For example, I can say give me the background here, and then it will filter down. Why is everything so slow? Let me just check if something is going so slow. It's actually quite Blend that is doing a lot of things together. Okay, anyway, so as you see, I now have drawn a rectangle. I can draw buttons, and as you can see, this is all very easy and very fast to work with. It's a lot faster than what I have in Visual Studio. On the bottom left here, you see the object and timeline window, which gives me an overview of the nesting within my interface. So this is actually a nesting or tree view of my application that I see here. Of course, this also generates some XAML code, as you can see here. The XAML code I don't have to bother with. I can type, or I can edit the XAML code here as I want. I have IntelliSense, but I prefer actually to do my XAML editing in Visual Studio, but that's probably a personal preference. and also we have a split view. And finally, so let's go back here. So here we have the properties window, which has many properties available to us. And then we have the resources window, which has an overview of the available resources inside of my application. And finally, we have the data window. I will take a look at those later on as well. So with that, I hope I gave you a small overview of the Expression Blend tool. I'm going to shut it down because it seems to be crashing for some reason. So let's save that. All right. Okay. Let us now go to the slides back again. And so the first thing that I want to explain you a bit is Sketchflow. Now I already talked in one of my previous webinars about Sketchflow. I think it was in the 10-tip one. But I really wanted to emphasize the use of Expression Blend in the Expression Blend talk, of course, as well. Now, what exactly is Sketchflow? When you take a look at what people use to design prototypes of applications, what do they use? They use Visio, perhaps they use PowerPoint, which are great tools, but I think there's room to improve here as well. Because what do you end up with when using Visio to prototype an application? A huge pile of documents, which has some screen design on there, and then a huge explanation on how the screen is going to work. That's what you end up with. So what you end up giving to your customer is a documentation of an application that is to be created. But it misses something. It misses the interactivity. And that's why Expression Blend is such a great tool. Expression Blend Sketchflow, that is. So Expression Blend Sketchflow is part of Expression Blend, allowing us to create prototypes very easily. All right. So what exactly it is it then? It is a prototype designer that uses or that lives entirely in Expression Blend. It's different from what Visio or PowerPoint offers us, in a sense that what we create, the prototypes that we create with Expression Blend are interactive. We can create several screens. We can click on an item, on a button, for example, navigate to another screen. So that is actually the part of the name, the sketch flow. The flow part refers to that particular thing. We have screens, we have an application already coming out of Expression Sketchflow. The sketchy part of the name actually refers to the fact that the screens that we are designing with Expression Blend are drawn, as if they were drawn by hand. This is actually quite a clever thing of Microsoft doing it this way, because this allows me to say to my customer, well, what I have here is actually something that was quickly drawn and allowing us to discuss what we're going to build. Otherwise, the customer might think, well, what he's now done is almost the final application. And he did that in, let's say, 2-3 days, while he estimated the full application to be 100 days to actually create. So that's why I like the fact that Sketchflow actually has everything drawn by hand. Seems as it was drawn by hand. Now, the good thing about creating an application or a prototype of an application with Expression Sketchflow is that everyone gets involved in the design of the application. You make an application, a working application, you can send that to your customer, get feedback, create a next iteration, and very quickly come to a working application very early in the process of the development of the application. And it's much easier, I've experienced it myself, to talk about something that is already there and that the user can work with. Now, you see on this screenshot here on the left that there is some drawing being done. So this is the sketchy interface of Expression Sketchflow. Now, instead of talking about it, let me open Expression Blend again. Let's check that everything is fine now. Yeah, now it doesn't seem to be crashing, so that's fine. So I can create new Sketchflow projects. As you can see here, there is a Silverlight Sketchflow application, and I'm going to use that. There is also one for Windows Phone, and there are templates available on Codeplex for Windows Phone as well. So by default, it is installed for Silverlight and WPF. Windows Phone, you need to download an open source project for that. So I'm going to create a new project, new prototype, in fact, and the interface is actually still the same. While it may be a bit confusing in the beginning for for someone who's not really into Expression Blend, like an analyst on your team, it is in fact, and I've done it personally, it is in fact very easy to learn an analyst to work with Expression Blend. So don't think that it's really difficult to work with it. So the interface is now a bit different. We see here at the top the sketch flow map, which currently has one screen, and I can, this is my screen, and this screen allows me to draw the prototype of this particular screen. So let's call this, for example, the login screen. And this login screen, well, what do we have on there? Well, we have, for example, a login button and some text fields. So let's go to the Assets tab here at the top. And in the Assets tab, we have Sketch Styles. And this list now shows a complete list of all the sketch interfaces of my controls. So for example, I can say, well, let's take a button. And I want to create a login button. So I draw on a button. I hope you can see it, that this is like as if it were drawn by hand or written by hand. So this is now my login button. In fact, in a real application, of course, we would have many more controls. Now I'm going to create a second screen. So from the Sketchflow map, I'm going to click here, create a connected screen, and that is going to be, for example, my main screen.
Jill? Sorry for interrupting,
yes.
but we have some requests to increase a bit the font size. I mean, maybe reduce the screen resolution because people can't read exactly the menus and.
This way is maybe better for this one. Let's see what we can do here. I can put this one larger as well. Is this better? Because I cannot see the output. For me, it's fine.
I think these menus on the left, for example, just. It's not clearly visible what exactly you select, and people write. If it's possible to increase the font somehow, maybe just
that font I cannot. But let me quickly try if I can use the zoom in tool. But it doesn't.
Or
really
maybe
work
can you reduce the screen resolution a bit?
Yeah, I can try that. 1 second. I'm going to close this one down, and let's change the resolution. Let's try this one perhaps. And let's go to here again. I hope this is more readable.
Yeah, I think it's better. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's better? Okay. Okay, we'll do it this way. What do we have now? I'm not going to zoom this one out again. So we have now the login screen, which is now connected to the main screen. And on this main screen, I could, for example, say I'm going to add a text block. So I hope you can read it now. So this is the text block sketch, and then here I can say, well, this is the main screen. So let's assume this is everything that is that is to be built in my application. I can now simply run this. So it's building the application. So the outcome of an expression sketch flow is a full Silverlight application hosted in the browser for me. So at this point, for example, if this were a real application, I can call my customer and say, well, dear customer, I have placed the application on my on some web server. Go to it and you can already test it. So as you can see, I can click on, no, well, I think I forgot to actually do the navigation. Let me quickly do that. So here I can say now, navigate to main. Let's run it again. Sorry for that. So I can now click on this login button and I arrive on the main page. So this is now a real application already. Inside of the Sketchflow player, which is what you're seeing now, I have a map that is showing me the navigation as well. And now what is also cool is that there is, oops, that I didn't have to do, there is the ability for the user to give feedback. For example, assume that he doesn't like this login screen. So we can simply say here, well, this is not cool. This is not okay. There we go. And he can export this feedback, send it to me as a feedback file. And when I'm back in Expression Blend, I can simply add in the Sketchflow feedback window, which is down here at the bottom. I can say now, add me some feedback. I place it on the desktop, I think. There we go. And as you can see now, when I click on it, I get that same feedback inside of Expression Blend Sketchflow. So this allows me to have an iterative process of my application prototype development. Now, in the back, what is this creating? This is creating screens. This is creating XAML files. As we can see here, we can switch to code. As you can see, it's just Sketchflow. It's just XAML code. There is also code behind. Nothing different here. There's code behind that we can work with, that we can use. But it is so. In fact, what we get is a working Silverlight application. So this is expression Sketchflow. One question that I like to finish off this part with is that many people ask, should I use a expression Sketchflow prototype as the basis of a real application? Well, I would suggest no, because I think that during the prototype development, you're not taking into account things like reuse of user controls, for example. The real structure of your screen is not something that you take into account when building a prototype, so I would suggest not doing that. You can do it, but I would suggest not doing it. If you would, however, do it, the thing that you need to do is go look in your XAML code for references to that button sketch style or other sketch styles that are inside of your XAML code, and simply remove those, and then you have the working application. But as mentioned, I wouldn't really suggest doing that. All right. So now I'm going to move over to a chapter all related to customizations. And customizations is one part where Expression Blend really shines, in my opinion. The thing is, if you start doing customizations from Visual Studio, it is all going to work. There is nothing that is not going to work, but it is going to be a manual task. Writing a lot of code by hand, which is really easy to make errors with. So that's why I suggest doing many more things from Expression Blend. The first thing that I suggest doing from Expression Blend is styling. Now, just as a small reminder, what exactly is a style? Well, it is a grouping of visual properties inside of a style element. So here you see a style element which is placed in this case at the application resources level. So that means that this particular style is available throughout my application. I have a style which has a key, which is the name basically inside of the resource bag for that particular style, and I have a target block, a target type, which is in this case a text block. And then for every property I want to change, I add a setter. So then when I use, I want to use or want to apply a style, well, I simply refer to that style as referring it using the style markup, the static resource markup extension for the style, and then referring to the name, which is style1, which was the key that was used in this particular style definition. And then there's also a default style, an implicit style, also known as the implicit style. So default style basically omits the key for the style, only specifying a target type, and that means that that style is going to be applied whenever no other style is going to be applied on that particular target type. So every text block in this case throughout my application would use this particular style if I'm not specifying another style. Now, doing styles from Visual Studio, basically what I need to do is write all that by hand. If I use Expression Blend, well, I have a style editor allowing me to create my styles visually. And I'm going to start by showing you that in the next demo. So let me fire up Expression Blend again. But anyway, I have Expression Blend here again. I'm going to create myself a new project. I'm going to, of course, go back to a regular Silverlight application now. So I'm creating a new Silverlight application, and so let us, for example, take a button. Let me draw a button. Now, a button, well, basically I can change stuff on that button. For example, I can say I want to change the border brush. I want to make it green. No, this one I want to make green, and this one I want to make blue, for example. I'm going to change that green as well. And just to make it visible, I'm going to increase the border brush a bit so you see it. So now I have created a border brush on my button. But if we take a look at the XAML code, I hope you can read it. It is actually nothing more than a style. Not a real style, it's actually XAML code, sorry, a linear gradient brush applied directly on to that button. if I need to reuse that, I simply can't. So that's why I would use a style. So let's take a look at how we can create this now as a style from ExpressionBlend. So I'm going to delete that button, and I'm going to create myself a new button. And now instead of doing the property designing directly on the button, I'm going to go to my object menu and then select edit style. And then I have two options, create an empty one or edit a copy. And I'm going to go here now for, let's say create empty. And I'm going to create this style in this particular document now. There we go. So now, if you look here at the top, I am not really editing my user control anymore. I am editing the style of my button. So when I now do stuff on that particular button, for example, let's do the same thing as we did before. I'm going to give it some new colors, and let's make this one green and increase that again. There we go. So now what it actually did, let's take a look at the XAML code again. So now it has created inside of that user control resources block a style which is named button style 1, and it targets the button, and the button has now a style reference to button style 1. Now the good thing is that I can now reapply that style whenever I want. Now I should level up to the application user control level again. So now I clicked here, so I'm now editing the page again. And let's now apply some, add a few more buttons. And when I now go to the resources window, which is on my right here, I have here the button style 1, which I can now simply pick up and drag to all these different button instances. I can say apply this style, apply it several times, there we go. So now it's very easy from a developer's standpoint also to apply that particular style all over the place. And should I now be editing that particular style again, so I can select each of these buttons again and say object edit style, edit the current one. Then I am again in the edit window of that particular style, and let's for example change that color, and you'll see that all the other buttons are changing colors just like the one that we are working with. So it's actually the style that I'm changing, and all the buttons that use that same style are being changed. Now there is a problem with this way of working. The thing is, I have now placed my style inside of my user control. In fact, I allowed Blend to place it in there. In many cases, what you are going to do by default is placing all your style information inside of your app XAML, inside of the resource there. There is nothing wrong with that, absolutely not. There is one thing that is bothering me with it, is that I've seen projects where the app XAML is perhaps several thousands of lines long, and that is huge because it, for example, could crash Visual Studio. For that particular problem, Microsoft introduced resource dictionaries into XAML. Resource dictionaries are actually a way of spreading over several dictionaries your resources. Now, instead of them placing your XAML resources inside of your app XAML, you can place them in resource dictionaries. Now, of course, it is not a good idea to move everything from the app XAML into one resource dictionary. It is a good idea to create several resource dictionaries. For example, one for all brushes, one for all colors, and a different one for perhaps control styles. This makes it easy to apply different styles, keep them manageable because they are in different files. The files don't become very big because they all have a particular meaning. And it's also making it possible to theme an application. Because what I often do is place all my resources for a particular theme into one assembly, and then by switching references to assemblies, I'm actually theming my application. Of course, those assemblies refer then to different resource dictionaries. Okay, let me show you how easy it is to manage resource dictionaries from ExpressionBlend. So let us create a new application. I'm going to create a new application again. And to start with, I am going to do what I just said. I am not going to place my resource dictionaries inside of the same file, same project. I'm going to place them in a new project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new project to my solution and then select a Silverlight control library. And I'm going to call it my styles, for example. So this is my Silverlight control library, which is actually a class library. Okay. So by default, this contains a file called main-control.xaml, and it's basically an empty XAML file. So now I am going to add to my project, to my styles project, a new item, and that is of type resource dictionary. And for example, I'm going to call it colors, which is now a resource dictionary. The resource dictionary, the colors.xaml, has no interface. So I cannot do any visual drawing of elements here to save them into the resource dictionary. So what I do is I use that main control that was already created for me, and I'm going to draw there and then have my styles copied to my resource dictionary. Okay, so what I'm going to start with is creating a new rectangle, and I'm going to make it blue. I like this blue, so I'm going to convert it into a color resource. That's what I'm going to do here. So on the very in my property window on the right here, I'm going to convert this color into a resource. I'm going to name it blue color. There we go. And I want now to place this inside of the colors.xaml file. If you take a look at the colors.xaml file in the XAML code, there is now inside of this resource dictionary a color which is called blue color, and it refers to this particular color. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use another color. I'm going to use this green one here. And I'm going to convert it into another named resource, place it also in the colors.xaml file. So now I have, when I take a look at my resources window, sorry, not this one. I have now two resources, the blue color and the green color. Okay. Now what I can do is, for example, I can apply a gradient here as well. So I can use a gradient brush, which defaults to black to white. Now I can select the little arrow here and switch to color resources and take the blue and take this one, switch to green color, and now I have created a gradient from my brush colors. Now how do I save this to my resources? Well, inside of the advanced options for the fill here, inside of the properties window, I can click on the advanced options and say convert this into a new resource. This is then I'm gonna call it my gradient, and I'm gonna place it as well in the colors.xaml. And as you see now there is a blue color, a green color, and a gradient that refers to those colors that I have here. Oops, that was not the one I wanted to show. So this is the resource dictionary now. I have a blue color, a green color, and then the gradient that refers to these two particular colors. So it's very easy to manage these things from my resources window, as you can see. Now, the cool thing is that I can again use that resource window and use drag and drop interfacing from my resource dictionary to use my resources inside of my app. So let us now go to the real application, which is called main page. There's nothing yet there. So I can again, for example, draw a rectangle. No, I'm gonna use a button. Otherwise, it's always the same rectangle. So I have a button now in my real application. How do I now apply those resources that are in the resource dictionary in the other project? Well, Expression Blend does a cool thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a project reference to my project called My Styles. Okay. And if everything went well, let's take a look. Well, it didn't do it, for example, something went wrong here. It should have added a reference to my resource dictionary, which it didn't. So I'm going to copy the code very quickly. Let me go to this one. The cool thing by default is that it normally creates this link automatically. In fact, I know what I did wrong. I created the resource dictionary after I created the project reference. So if you want this link to be added automatically, it should be done before. So let's build this one now and see if everything works. I call this my resources, and here I have this should be my styles. Let's change that, and this is colors.xaml. and now it finds it fine. Okay, so I'm going to build this to be sure, and let's now go to the application, which is called main page. And from this resources window, again, drag and drop my resources. For example, this gradient, I want to drag it onto my button. There we go. For example, let's use this as the border brush. There we go. I sure you can't see it, so I'm going to increase the border brush, the border thickness a bit. And as you can see, it now used that resource that is inside of the resource dictionary. If we take a look at the code, it simply refers to the my gradient that lives inside of the resource dictionary. All right. So that's it about for managing resources. Now, another thing that I really think that you need Expression Blend for is custom control development. And the two next points, this one and the next one, are entirely devoted to custom control development. Now, how can you do control development or custom control development? Well, what I can do is I can say to a button, to a control in general, I don't like the way you look. I'm going to give you a new template. And that is in the way or by means of a control template. So a control template basically allows me to redefine how a control is actually looking. And so how it is visually being shown. Now, managing or creating control templates by hand is again a very code-intensive task that should be avoided to be done by hand. So that's why I use Expression Blend to create control templates. Now, what exactly is a control template? Well, it can be placed as a different or a separate element inside of my resources, as you see here in the sample code. I'm going to skip this slide. I'm going to explain it in inside of my demo. So I'm going to switch back to Expression Blend, create a new project. They are very cheap, so why not create a new one? So let us, for example, create a new button. Where have we seen that again? Now, one thing that I often notice is that people, when they want to give a button a different color, they say, well, they go to the properties window and they say, I want to make this button green. And I assume you don't see this quite a lot because, in fact, there is nothing to be seen. Because the gradient, there's like this little gradient in front of the green. There is the green gradient. Perhaps it's better visible if I make it red. But it's not really red like I would want it to be. This is because inside of the control template, the default control template, there is something sitting in front of it. Now, what can we do? Well, we can change that template. So I don't like this gradient thing in front of my red button. I want to have a full red button. So what I should do is edit the template. Now, you can go out to MSDN and find the templates for the button, but it's actually quite difficult and actually quite an annoying task to do. From Expression Blend, I can simply go to the object window and use the edit template, or I can right click here and say edit the template, edit a copy. So what this is going to do, it is going to copy the entire template of the button inside of XAML, and I can start changing that directly here. So I'm going to change that. Now I am again editing the control template. I am in editing mode, not of the user control, but of the control, the button template. Let us now go here to the Objects and Timeline window, and there is now an overview of the different elements inside of my control. So in here, I can go and take a look. If you see background, that probably has something to do with the background, and there is a grid in front of it. Before I move on, let's take a look at what happened here on the right. You see now that there is a yellow border around the background. This means that there is a so-called template binding active. This particular grid here that we have in the Objects and Timeline window has its background property bound using a template binding to the control definition. So I can specify inside of my control definition, so my control instantiation, I should say, that there is a link between a property in the control instantiation and this template using a template binding. Okay, let's dig a bit further. And then we see here this grid. Well, there is something in front of it. That's exactly what I'm seeing. So this background animation, I don't need it, and this background gradient, I don't need it as well. And what I've now done is I've edited the template of the control. I've edited the template, the control template of this particular button. Let's take a look at what is generated in XAML for me. It's created actually a copy of my default template of my control. And right here at the bottom, we have a border which has a grid, that's the grid that we saw in the Object and Timeline window, which has, as mentioned, a template binding to the background. So this takes the property that was used in the control instantiation when I dragged my control and I gave it a red background through the properties window. This value is pushed into this particular value. And then there is another element, an important one, the content presenter. Now the content presenter is the placeholder for your content. It will be replaced with any content, or with the content, let's say, that you use in your control instantiation. So for example, if I go to my user control again, and let's say I use an ellipse, make it green, and I drag this ellipse in the Object and Timeline window into the button, it's now placed inside of the button, but it's actually being placed inside of the button where the content presenter control is. So the content presenter is nothing but a placeholder for your control. So that basically shows us the 3 steps that we need to do from Expression Blend. We use it, or we take any control, we right click on it, and we say edit a template, create me a copy or edit a copy. It's taking a full copy of the default template. I can start changing that. I see bindings between my control template and my control instantiation, and the content presenter I can use to place the content that is defined with the control instantiation. Now, while this is all fine and dandy, there is actually a lot of it works, but it's actually not really that easy to do. With the button, it's still rather easy to do, but as you have seen, it's quite a lot of code that is arriving in your XAML code as well. There is a second model to do custom control development, in fact, and that is our control templating, and that is the parts and states model. And again, the parts and states model is actually quite code intensive and is not to be done by hand using Visual Studio, I think. Now, to give you a very quick and a very brief overview of the parts and states model, what does it actually consist of? Well, parts and states. Now, that probably doesn't really help you if you've never heard of the model. Now, basically, the philosophy behind the model is the following. It says that a control has parts which are moving elements. Moving parts are the parts of an element. And you can best imagine that using a slider. A slider has, for example, the thumb that you can slide up and down. Well, that is a part. It is something that you can interact with as a user. And there is a contract between the control code, the control logic, and the control visual containing that particular part, in the sense that that part is being referenced from the code. If you remove the part from the control, well, the control won't work anymore like it was supposed to do. If you remove a thumb from a slider, it's not going to be a slider anymore. So that is actually the part. The states are, well, the different states a control can be into, and we can define a different visual look for each of these states. So for example, a button can be in a pressed state, can be in a hover state, and all those are different states, and I can define as a developer different visual looks for each of these states. And that is the states of the parts and states model. And all of these are managed by the so-called Visual State Manager, which is actually logic that sits inside of your control and that says, well, now we need to go to this particular state, and it should look like this if we move to this particular state. So that I have in a few slides here, so let's quickly go over them. So the parts are the moving elements of a control, the working parts. The states are, well, the states, the different states a control can be in, and I can define a visual look for each of these states. And they are managed by the Visual State Manager. They are also in groups. I'm going to skip that. And between states, we can define transitions. A transition is basically how we should actually move between states. Otherwise, the state transition would be abrupt. So going from the from the mouse over to the press state without a transition would be immediate. Now, using a transition in between there, I can define how the control should look when going from state 1 to state 2. Okay. Let's take a look at another demo. I'm going to open Expression Blend again and create a new project. Oops, that's a new item. Let's go to the new project. Let's save it. Let's for example take a checkbox in this case. Checkbox is a nice one to take a look at states. So let's use a checkbox. There we go. Now I should start by setting, to make it a bit more interesting, I'm now going to set this the is3state property to true, which is making it possible for my checkbox to be in the checked state, the unchecked state, and the null state, so the the indeterminate state. So it can have 3 states now. Okay, now we are going to add the template again. So I'm going to right click and say edit template, edit a copy. Okay, that's fine. Checkbox style is defined. Now I want to change how the control looks in the checked state, the unchecked state, and the indeterminate state. So that is actually changing the states, or the looks, how the different states should be displayed. So I go to to a particular window which is called the states window. And this states window, and I hope you can see it, gives me an overview of all the states that are defined inside of the control. So a control can have can be in a checked state, unchecked state, and indeterminate state. It can also be in a focused and a non-focused state. So these are all the states defined by Microsoft inside of the user control. Sorry, inside of the control, not user control. Now I can, as a developer, change how my control looks in these different states. Okay, let's do that. For example, let's say in the unchecked state, I'm clicking the unchecked state, and automatically the state recording starts, which is now going to record what I'm doing to change how the visual look of that particular state should be. So I can go to the grid here and set the background to, for example, it's let's say it's I'm going to use this one. It is unchecked, so let's put it to green. There we go. That's fine. If it is checked, I should put it to red, for example. There we go. Let's make it red. I should go here and make this one. I'm just checking. I'm moving the base state to an opacity. Don't worry. And I'm going to change the indeterminate state also, and I'm going to set that to, well, let's say yellow. Okay. So I have now redefined how the different states should look. And now what I can do to finish this off is change the transition. So there's a default transition, which is saying every state change for this control should now take, in this case, 0 seconds. I'm going to increase it to, let's say, 0.7 seconds. This is now the default transition. Every transition will take this particular amount of time. There's also specific transitions. So I can say if we go from, for example, the unchecked state to the checked state, well, that should take, for example, 0 seconds, let's say, for example. Well, let's set it to 0.2. All right. So now I've defined how my control template should look. Let's run it. Let's see what we have. I should now have a checkbox that is by default green. That's fine. I click it, and it moves in a time perhaps of 0.2 seconds to the checked state, which is red, and then it takes 0.7 seconds to go to the indeterminate state, the yellow one, and then I can go back to the green state, and then I can keep on clicking as long as I want. And you see the different states transitions happening. All right. A reason not to do this by hand, I think I can quickly convince you that, of course, there's a lot of code here that doesn't really, well, this is the default template being edited. You see here the visual state groups. That's not the one that we edited. So we have the checked state and the unchecked state here, which contain how we defined how our control should look in this particular state. But I think it's quite easy that to understand that you don't want to do this by hand. You want to do this with an editor, and that's why you need Expression Blend as a developer to do custom control development. All right. So with that, we are through with the customization part. Let's now take a look at the data part. A very, very cool feature is the ability to generate sample data inside of Expression Blend. Well, there's not really much to tell about sample data in Expression Blend. It is sample data that we can have generated for us using Expression Blend. Now, why on earth would we want sample data to be generated? Well, for one thing, we can export it to Visual Studio. Another thing is that if you are editing a template, for example, an item template of a list box, how are you going to visually see what you're doing if you don't have sample data? Well, it's actually quite difficult to do. That's why the sample data generation is a very cool feature. Now, there's a lot of options in this. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'm going to show it directly. So let me move to the sample data demo. And that should be this one. I'm going to open it, of course, with Expression Blend. There we go. I've prepared them because otherwise it takes us too much time to do all looking around to generate the sample data source. I'm not going to spend time in for this. Okay. Let us take a look at what I did here. So in the data tab, which is here on the right, I have sorry for that. I have the ability to work, of course, with data. The first one that I have here is the ability to create a new sample data source, and that generates me what I have already defined here, a new sample data source. So normally I should click new sample data, define what my data source is going to be, but I already did that in this particular application. Now what I have here is so-called, I've called this data source the hotel data source, and it gives me an overview of a few hotels that I'm going to use inside of my application. It is actually a data source that contains a collection. It contains a collection of hotel items. So what I can do here is I can add to this collection, to do each item of the collection, in fact, 3 different properties. A simple property, which is, well, a single property, a name, an ID, first name, last name. A complex property, which is composed of several simple properties, and another collection property, which is a nested collection inside of the main collection. Okay, so I have here my collection, and inside of my list of hotels, I have a hotel name, which is a simple property, which is in this case of type string. I have several types that I can select, a number, a boolean. When I select string, I have the ability to generate lorem ipsum text, or I can say generate me some company names, generate me some colors, some dates. So I have different types of sample data that can be generated. I can also specify how many words and how long the words should be. I did the same, so I created another simple property for image, which I referred to a directory which contains me some sample images. Okay, I have also a number of rooms, which is of type number. Then I have the address property, which is a complex property, and it contains itself in turn some simple properties. And then I have the images property, which is another collection. So that is a nested collection. I can generate the sample data, so I can see the sample data, in fact, as you can see here. So it shows me the list of generated data. I can edit it if I want to, so you can use whatever you want. If, however, you should have specific needs, you can also start from an XML file. That is also possible. I'm not showing it here, but it is possible to also start from an XML file. Now, then I can use this sample data to generate a screen. So I simply selected, in this case, I think hotel name and image in list mode. Here at the top there is 2 modes, list mode and details mode. List mode allows me to create a list box, for example. So I selected these 2 properties and I dragged them onto the screen, and then I created this list box which has an image and the hotel name. Then I went to details mode, and then I dragged on the properties of the address, which you can be seen here. I have the images collection and the room types collection. And this all works auto-magically. For this I have to do nothing because the blend takes care of setting the data context and the data bindings so that it all results in a working application. And if I want to, like I mentioned in the beginning, I can use this, for example, to do item template editing. Let's say that this is a list box that I'm using in my application. I can right-click on it. If it works, there we go. I can say I want to edit this particular template, the item template, edit the current one. So there we go. I'm now in editing mode for the item template. For example, I can say move the text block first, and I'm changing the template. So it's possible to use this sample data generated data for making it more easy to do the interface creation because you really see what you are doing. Okay, so let's close this sample down. Let's not save that. Now there is, of course, related to that another feature that is very, very important in every application that you build, probably in XAML, and that is data binding. Now we've already spent quite a lot of time with data binding. There is a specific webinar related to data binding if you have any questions. Just to repeat what data binding is for the people who've never heard of it, it's an infrastructure that allows you to bind properties of data objects with properties of controls. And that's what you see here graphically shown on this particular slide as well. It offers synchronization support, and it also offers you a hook, a converter that allows you to change the value when going from source to the target. Now, the problem with data binding is syntax for several people. And while we have some IntelliSense in Visual Studio and some editors, it is perhaps better to do data binding from Expression Blend. I'm not saying it is better. I personally don't do it that often, but it is possible to do data binding from Expression Blend. And there is a nicely integrated designer for that to create data bindings. Let me show you that designer in action. Basically, this designer can do everything you need. Going from setting the data context to binding to properties on a data context, also, for example, to managing element bindings. Let me show you what I mean. Let's create a very simple project using data binding, or that uses data binding. I'm gonna show it to you using an element binding. It basically is always the same thing that you have to do. So I'm going to make the most easy sample with a data binding. I have a text block and I have a text box. And I want the text of the text box to be shown in the text block. What I do for that is I use a data binding and element binding, which allows me to create bindings between two elements. So what am I going to do? So the text property of this text block should be linked or should be bound to the text box's text property. Okay. So how can I do that? Well, I can, for example, start by searching for the text property in the property window. And there I have the advanced options again. And there I have the data binding link, which allows me to open the data binding wizard, let's say. It's not a real wizard, it's just one window. And here I have the three types of bindings I can do. I can bind to an element inside to a CLR object and bind to a property of that. I can do an element binding, which is what I'm going to do here, and I can also bind to a particular property with the data context already set. And I'm going to here use the element binding. So the text block, its text property. Let's go to the text property. The text box is text property, I should say. This is going to be the source for my binding, the text property. You see here, it is a one-way binding. I can set it to a two-way binding. I can have a default value. I can select a converter, should I have one, in my application. So all this can be done visually from Expression Blend. And what it saves us? Well, it saves us not having to do the manual XAML editing of the markup extension for the binding expression. And if we run this, of course, this should work. I hope I have not selected the wrong property. So when I type here, as you can see, it changes the text of the text block. What has this created for me? Well, let's take a quick look at the XAML code. This has created for me a XAML expression, a markup extension on the binding in this case. The text is the value, and it's set it to the source to the element name is set to text box. So that's the very cool thing. I did have to write this myself. Okay, now we are almost out of time. Well, perhaps I should skip behaviors. Svetla, can we go 10 minutes over time, or should we round up after just one more? What do you think? Hello? Okay, so anyway, we should continue. Okay, so yeah,
yes,
can we go 10 minutes?
Yes, I think you can go on, and if anyone needs to leave, he may just watch the recording. Okay.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll do the tool one, and then we'll finish off. Okay, so very quickly, what exactly is behavior? Well, as the word says it, a behavior is something that a particular object will do. It behaves in a particular way. We can add a behavior to any element. Now, a behavior was introduced with Silverlight Tree and Blend Tree because it's actually a blend feature. And again, you can use it from Visual Studio, but Blend allows us to do drag and drop of behaviors. And it also comes with a few behaviors. Now, exactly what does a behavior contain? Well, it contains a combination of a trigger that starts the behavior and an action which is the actual behavior. Initially, a behavior was created to make it possible to encapsulate some logic and allow a designer to use from Expression Blend that logic in fact. But again, as a developer, I like using behaviors because they allow me to do cool things. If you want to code them, you can. It is basically a class that inherits from behavior in UI element. And in that, we have to override two elements, the onAttached and the onDetaching. And every custom behavior we ourselves will make is usable from Expression Blend as well. How do we use it? Again, we can type the XAML or use it in a drag and drop sense from Expression Blend. Let me show you how what an expression, what a behavior exactly is and how it works. So let's open I'm going to open an existing project to make things a bit faster. Let's go to behaviors and let's open this with Expression Blend. Okay, so basically behaviors are automatically added when you install Expression Blend. So out of the box you get some free behaviors with the installation of Expression Blend. To see them, go to the assets window, and in there is a behaviors item which shows you all the behaviors out of the box installed with Expression Blend. Now I'm actually lying a bit because there are a few extras in here that I created myself. So in my project, let me go there first, I have two behaviors, the rotate behavior and the drop shadow behavior, which are in fact two extra behaviors, but when Blend sees them, it will automatically add them inside of the behaviors window. Now what does the drop shadow behavior do? Well, it allows me to add a drop shadow to any element that I associate it with. I'm not going to show you the code, you can take a look at it at your own pace afterwards. Now, let us take a look what we can do with these behaviors. Let's open the main page. I have a few elements on here. And let's go back to the behaviors. So you see that the drop shadow behavior is in here as well as the rotate behavior. Those two behaviors are in here. What I can do is I can drag them onto my page and it will automatically add the behavior. So a very cool one that is coming out of the box is, for example, the play sound action. I'm going to remove this one here. So I'm going to drag onto my screen, onto my button in this case, this behavior, which is in fact a trigger action, but let's assume it's a more complex format of a behavior. So I've dragged it on. As you can see here in the object and timeline window, this button now has the play sound action applied to it. Now it has some properties. For example, I can say when does the action has to trigger. I can say, well, click is fine. And then I have the ability to select, in this case, the property that I need to add, which is in this case an audio file, and I can set the volume. All these things I can do out of the box with these behaviors. this rectangle, I used my rotate behavior, which is in here. I drag my rotate behavior on this particular element. So if we run this, there we go. So I click on this, and you see the behavior is added automatically. There is no code involved. It automatically adds that extra behavior to this button when I click on it. This button now has the play sound action. I can click on it, and it will automatically start playing a song. As you could hear, there is a song behind that button. Okay. Let's go back to the slides. The last thing that I'm going to show you is Windows Phone development. Windows Phone development is also possible from Expression Blend. Well, there's not really much to explain to you apart from the fact that it's really cool that we have a visual way of developing pivot and panorama applications. Again, this works fine from Visual Studio as well, but well, there are a few things that also again work a bit better from Expression Blend. Let me show you how I can do this. Well, let's go open an existing solution. Let's open this with Expression Blend. There we go. So Expression Blend has, for Windows Phone development, of course, a completely adapted interface that shows me how, let's zoom out a bit, how my screens will look in a phone application, of course. It, of course, also links with the Windows Phone emulator. So if I go to the main page, as you can see here, I have a phone preview, a preview of phone application in here, and I can do drag and drop on this as well. I can select the button, and it automatically uses the Windows Phone start controls. Also, pivot and panorama applications, we can easily create them with with Expression Blend. As you can see here, I simply created a new panorama page, and in the panorama page, I can go here to the tile brush, select an image that I want to use as the background. Let's do that with a different image. Let's take my book, for example. Oh, sorry, I didn't include that in my application. I'm sorry. Oh, it seems to be too small, actually. No, anyway, let's go back to the background in this case. Oh, no, not this one. The sunset. I did something wrong here. I don't know what. But anyway, I hope you see that it's really easy to create Windows Phone applications as well. And everything, almost everything that I explained up until now is applicable to Windows Phone development as well. Okay, so with that, I think we are almost out of time. I don't have time for the bag of tricks, sadly, anymore, but you can take a look at them. The demos are included in with the download of the demos as well. So you can take a look at those demos as well. So I hope I showed you that Expression Blend is really a tool that, as a Silverlight developer, be it the Windows Phone, be it a WPF developer, should be part of your toolbox as well. Don't be afraid of it, because it might seem as a designer tool, but it really is also a developer tool. It should be part of your daily toolbox that you use for things like customizations, for controls, styling, and so on, and also, of course, the data generation. I haven't shown animations, but that is also a thing that you should use Expression Blend for. So with that, I hope I've given you a nice overview of the things that you as a XAML developer can do with Expression Blend. I hope you enjoyed it. And with that, I'd like to open it up now for some questions for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we'll the rest of the questions, if there are too many, we'll do by mail. So I hope there are some questions already.
Yes, I sent you some questions.
Yeah, let's take a look. Okay, there we go. There's a few questions available. The first question that I see here is, can I integrate a Sketchflow with a real database? Well, in fact, you can. It will require you to do some coding, but it is possible to do real data, to get in real data. There is the ability to connect with an object data source, not a real object data source, but in fact an object space data source, and you can use that in Expression Sketchflow as well. Because again, a Sketchflow application is really, well, it's really nothing different from a regular Silverlight application. And you can write code behind it. It's a prototype, but if it is important that you have real data, it should be no issue that you have to write a few lines of code to do to get real data in. You have to write some data access code that connects to a service, for example, inside of your Sketchflow app, or hard code some data. But I think your question is more to a real database. Well, add a service and add a data source, and it will work in Sketchflow as well. So Sketchflow ends up being a real Silverlight application. The next question is again about Sketchflow. Someone asks, how much effort do we need to spend to move Sketchflow screens to real application or real project code? Well, in fact, it is my opinion you shouldn't be doing that. So I cannot give you an estimate on the time. In fact, let's open a Sketchflow application, and it's easier to visualize what it has done. So I'm going to open an existing Sketchflow application. And this is something I created. I think it's for another demo that I gave. It's a greeting card generator, and I did this first in Expression Sketchflow, and then I did the real code. Let's take a look at what this thing has generated. For example, let's take wizard step number 1. And wizard step number 1, let's take a look at the XAML code. If I can move the screens around a bit because there's too much small things here. Okay, so let's take a look at the XAML code. So this is what Expression Blend has generated for me. It has a style. So this is, I think, a text block. Yeah, there's a style which says refer to basic textbox.sketch. So in fact, what you need to do to move it from a Sketchflow app to a real app is remove all these style references. Each type of control has its particular sketch style applied to it. So here's a button sketch. There is I don't know, it's a text box sketch. So what you need to do is move all those out. Do a find and replace throughout your project, and you have a real project. Again, it is my opinion that this might generate in less than optimal code because of the fact that you are throughout your prototype phase not thinking about reuse. I end up dragging things on my prototype that shouldn't be there in the end, but that I've simply placed there very quickly because it's just a prototype. So I hope that I've given you a good answer with that. It's just moving those styles out, but think about the fact that it might not be a good idea. Robert asks, I have Expression Blend for Windows Phone, which is a free product. That's correct. Is Sketchflow available, or is it only in the ultimate Expression version of, in the ultimate version of Expression Blend? Well, it is only in the ultimate version. I think it's certainly not in the free editions at this point. I also think it is not in the premium edition, but it is, I think, only available with the ultimate edition of Expression Blend. Let's take a look at another good question from Rahul is, does the customer need Sketchflow to enter feedback? Well, in fact, he doesn't. So the only thing that he needs is a browser with Silverlight installed. Because if we run this, what the user will get is a Silverlight application, and he can give feedback within his browser. So this is now a Silverlight app starting up, and as you see, there is already some feedback in this particular window. I don't need Sketchflow to have this working. I can simply say, well, this is not fine, this shouldn't be there. I'm doing this inside of my browser. I export this. This is also part of the functionality that comes inside of the Silverlight player. Export feedback, blah, and give it a name and save it. And this is actually a feedback file. And if you look at the file, this is the file. If you open it, it is basically some XML that is being generated, and that is read out by Expression Blend. So it's actually some XML simply where you have been drawing as the end user that is being exported and imported again in Expression Blend. Let me take a look at the questions that are still open.
Jill, can you pick just one last question, and we need to wrap up, so you reply to the rest of the questions at the end, after the webinar.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's a question about what frameworks do you know are Blend friendly? I think, and it's a question from Todd Dahl, I think he's referring to MVVM frameworks. Well, the good news is that most of the things are blend friendly. We often refer to this as the blendability. What exactly is the blendability? The capability of designing our application inside of Blend, even if it is being designed, of course, with a framework that supports MVVM. Inside of your code, it is possible to check whether or not you are in design mode or in runtime mode. And if you are in design mode, Expression Blend will pick it up, and you can place inside of that check to check if you're in design or not, code that will either call onto a view model or call onto a service. And so make sure that that code doesn't run while being in Expression Blend. So I think it's not a real question about a framework, because you can shield it off using some one line of code, but for the rest, it's basically each framework that I work with doesn't get no framework that I work with has problems working with Expression Blend. Okay, that's about it for me.
Yes, okay. Thanks, Jill, for being the presenter at today's webinar, and thanks everyone for attending. I expect a recording of this webinar tomorrow on Silverlight Show. We'd appreciate it if you fill in our webinar survey. You'll see it displayed right after the end of this webinar. Okay, so thanks for attending once again, and have a good day or evening.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.